Hello, everybody. This is the fourth class in our course called Reclaiming the Cry of Your Soul for Applied Jewish Spirituality. I'm Rabbi Mordechai Zeller, and here we are learning about the shofar and about the different sounds and our kavanot, our intentions in making the sounds and in hearing them. And I also want to tell you that the things that we've been learning, I feel that when I took this upon myself to prepare for the high holidays, I didn't expect it to really, something about preparing this course for me has also been really meaningful. And I have a feeling that this year, blowing the shofar and listening to the shofar will be a bit of a different experience for me as well. So thank you for being with me on this journey. And if we did on the first one, we spoke about the cry of the soul. And then we spoke about the moment of creation, the baby being born, the mother giving birth. The second class, we spoke about the moment of the nesirah, the split, the place where the coming together and coming apart, the divorce and the union. And today we're speaking about a third in the list of voices. And we'll be speaking about the shofar as the sound and the call of death. I told Daniel, and hopefully maybe this will be next year, I'm hoping to have a whole course in the AJS just around Jewish practices around death and dying, the Jewish Book of the Dead, and to kind of learn just that. And I'm hoping, I don't know if it'll be this year, but it's cooking. And today we'll get a little taste of that around the shofar and around Rosh Hashanah, but it's such an amazing part of our life. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Sometimes we say about somebody that they died in their sleep, and they say, oh, he died so peacefully in his sleep. And part of me says, oi, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'd like to be awake for my moment of death. Donald Winnicott, the great psychoanalyst, said, Lord, may I be alive at the moment of my death. That was his prayer. He wrote it in one of his notebooks that were found after he died. So today we're going to speak about the shofar as a moment of death and what this brings up and what this awakens as one of those sounds that's so loud that it's not even heard. So I'm going to bring up the page now. Okay. So the first text that I brought, you know what, before a text, I want to tell a story. We'll start with the story. And this is a wonderful story about a Hasidic master whose name was Reb Leib Saris, and he was a wandering Maggid. He went from place to place, and he told stories, and he had the ability to speak to people right into their heart. And he was around, he knew the Baal Shem Tov as well as the Maggid, so he's in the early Hasidic time period. And one day it's Yom Kippur, and the eve of Yom Kippur, he comes to a small village, and he comes in, and the Jews are gathering, and he says, are we going to have a minyan? And they say, we're not sure. There are 8 of us, and you're number 9, so no, it doesn't look like we're going to get a minyan. A minyan is, I'm sure you all know, but 10 people, 10 men in Orthodox circles. More and more places are also counting women for a minyan, Rabbi Ethan Tucker being one of them. And slowly things are happening there. But in these circles, they needed 8 men above the age of bar mitzvah in order to say certain parts of prayer. That's what's called a minyan. And they said, we don't have a minyan, we only have 9. And Reb Leib Saris said, is there anybody who lives in this village who maybe isn't that observant but is Jewish? And they said, yeah, but don't waste your time on him. It's just like, and he said, who is it? They said, the Paritz, the owner of this land, he was born to a Jewish family, but to say that he doesn't come on Yom Kippur, he doesn't help the Jewish community out, he's so far from it, he's an old man, he never helps, and ever since he left the community, he's not been very helpful. He definitely doesn't identify as a Jew, and And Reb Leib said, show me his house. And they pointed at the big castle at the top of the hill. And he walked over there wearing his prayer shawl. And he comes and he knocks on the door. And this man opens the door and says, yes? And he says, my name is Reb Leib Saras. I came all the way here to pray with the Jews of this community on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. According to our halacha, we're missing one person. And this is a day that we stand in front of everybody. We forget all the sins, all the debts, everything is forgiven. And I would like to invite you, we need you, to come be a tenth for our minyan. And everybody thought that he was going to slam the door in his face, but he was moved. Something about the way Reb Leib said it, he was moved. And he didn't think anybody would ever invite him, so he says, I'll come. And when he came to shul, everybody was shocked, but he comes in, he asked for a prayer shawl, and he went and he stood in the corner in the back of the synagogue, covered himself in his prayer, and started praying. And as the tune of Kol Nidrei started, which is an old tune, suddenly they heard him starting to cry, and they saw him shaking under the talit. Kol Nidrei ve'asarei ve'kinuyei di-da-da-da-da-da. And he's shaking and weeping, and he's there. And at the end, it's not like you invite him for a meal because nobody's going home to eat. So they left and he stayed there in the back of the synagogue. When they came in the morning, he was still there. Did he go home? Was he there? He didn't move. He didn't even sit. He's standing in the corner, covered in his prayer shawl. And the whole day, he stood there and didn't move, under his prayer shawl, praying and praying and praying. And at the end, he went through Shacharit, through Musaf, through Mincha, the afternoon prayer. And on Yom Kippur there's 5 prayers, the last prayer being Ne'ilah, which literally means the locked doors. Ne'ilah, it's the prayer that we pray and we say at this moment when the sun is at the top of the trees about to set, before the sun sets. This is the last chance before the day is over, and it's the most intense prayer. And the prayer ends with yelling the verse Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, and saying Hashem wa Elokim, God, Hashem is our God 7 times. And at the end, a shofar is also, they blow a shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. Which is interesting because Yom Kippur, it's like Shabbat. We're not allowed to light fire. It's even more sacred than Shabbat. It's called Shabbat Shabbaton. But you're allowed, you need to blow a shofar. And usually you do it at the end, so it's early, but you have a shofar waiting for you. And at the end, when they started Shema Yisrael and Hashem wa Elokim, and he ran to the ark, opened up the ark, put his head in, and started weeping bitterly. And at the moment when the Chazan blew the shofar at the end, he dropped dead on the floor in front of the ark. And Reb Leib Saras, for the rest of his life, would always say a Kaddish, a mourner's Kaddish, for this person on Yom Kippur. Because he said, here is a person who all he needed was one day. All he needed was one day. Sometimes we think it's too late, I've been through so much, how can I ever fix it? But Reb Leib Saras, he said, here is a person. It's never too late. At whatever moment you're at, it's never too late. And at the moment of the shofar at the end, that was the moment that together with the shofar, his soul left him. So now we're going to kind of jump into our class. So the first verse that I brought, make this a little bit bigger. Hang on. Let me close this. Oh, here we go. One second. Here we go. Okay. So the first is from prayer that we say on Yom Kippur called Unetaneh Tokef. And it's read at every one of the prayers. And it's a beautiful song written by Rabbi Amnon of Magnetza, who supposedly died and was killed for being Jewish. And he wrote this poem about the sacredness of Yom Kippur. And it talks about the moment where judgment is happening. And it's sung, and it's a very powerful part of the prayer. And it says, "You open the book of memories, and it shall be read on its own, and in it lies each person's insignia, chotam yad," which literally could mean every person's hand. But it means like the books of life and death are opened, and each person, part of him is written in this book. And a great shofar is sounded, and a still small voice shall be heard. And the angels shall be hastened, and fear and trembling shall seize them as they proclaim, as they go this way and that way, "Behold, the day of judgment! And all the creatures shall pass before you like a herd of sheep. As a shepherd herds his flock, directing his sheep to pass under his staff, so you shall pass, count and record the souls of all living, and decree a limit to each person's days, and inscribe their final judgment." So God is seen as a shepherd, and each person stands in front of him like a sheep under the stick when he's counting his flock, making sure he has all of them. He doesn't lose one of them. On Rosh Hashanah, it is inscribed in the book of life. And on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many shall pass away? Mi yamut. How many shall be born? Mi yichyeh. Kama yavrun. How many will pass on? Kama yibareun. How many will be created, will be born? Who shall live? Mi yichyeh. Who shall die? Mi yamut. Who in good time? Mi bekitzo. Who by an untimely death? Mi lo bekitzo. Who by water? Who by fire? Who by sword? Who by wild beast? Who by famine? Who by thirst? Who by earthquake? Who by plague? And we stand there saying, there's so many ways that a person in this world, what will this year be like? Will it end well for me? Will I live? And if I die, how will I die? For you do not desire the death of the condemned, rather that they turn from their path and live. And you wait for them until the day of their death. And if they repent, you receive them immediately. Man comes from dust and returns to dust. Ha'adam yesodo me'afar v'sofo le'afar. We labor by our lives for bread. We are like broken shards of pottery, like dry hay, like withered flowers, like a passing shadow, a vanishing cloud, a blowing wind, dust that scatters, like a fleeting dream. What a poem that is. And it puts us directly in touch with that feeling, that dread. What will be this year? Here we are, we've already been born. But will this be a year that I'll be written in the book of life and keep living? Is it a year that I won't? Will I die this year? These are questions we ask ourselves as we pray. And that throws me into, again, this you know so well already because we've done it so many times, so we can do it quickly. But again, come and see, the Zohar says. There are 3 sounds that are never lost. The sound of a person when the soul escapes the body and wanders from one end of the world to the other. What's produced by these sounds? Where do they enter and dwell? These sounds are of pain. They roam and wander in the air and travel from one end of the world to the other. They enter cracks and tunnels in the dust. They lie hidden there. When a person sounds his voice, they are awakened. And on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the sound of the shofar awakens the sound of another shofar, the echoes of this world. And in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, where they say there's 6 voices, so again, one of the voices of 6 go from one end of the world to the other, yet their voices can't be heard. When the soul departs from the body, the cry goes forth from one end of the world to the other, and the voice is not heard. The soul doesn't go out of the body until it beholds the Shekhinah. Right? It says, there's a verse that says, Ki lo yir'eni ha'adam v'chai. A person cannot see me and keep on living. And from that, the pshat literally means Nobody can see God. But it says you can't see me and live. But that means, says the mystic, that at my moment of death, do I get to see you, God? Yes, that's what the Midrash says. The soul doesn't go out of the body until it beholds the Shekhinah. As it is said, for man shall not see me and live. Ha b'shat mitato ro'eh. The moment of death, we all see God. So there's a lot of different deaths, different ways to die, and different images of what death is like. But one of the most beautiful ones in the Gemara, it talks about the death of Moses, of Aaron, of Miriam, of a bunch of other people. And it says that they died in a mitat neshika, the kiss of death. Have you heard of the kiss of death? What is the kiss of death? It means that death is like a kiss, like a moment where God's lips are on us, and in that tender, loving kiss, that's the moment we die. And how do we learn this? This is an amazing thing, because it says, in the verse, it says, Vaya'al Aharon HaKohen el Hor Hahar, and Aaron the priest went up to the mountain, ascended Mount Hor. Now I switched this a little bit, because it says, Al Pi Hashem, by the decree of God. That's what it was written. But that's not the transliteration. That's not the exact translation, because the exact translation, if you know Hebrew, is, and he died Al Pi Hashem. What is Al Pi Hashem? Not by the decree of God, but he died in the mouth of God, or from the mouth of God. Al Pi Hashem Vayamat Sham. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, there were 6 people over whom the angel of death had no sway in their demise, in their death. And they are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, I skipped a little bit. As it is written with regard to them, that they died Al Pi Hashem, not by the decree of God, but by the mouth of the Lord, which indicates that they died with a kiss, not in the hand of the angel of death. The Gemara asks, wait a minute, with regard to Miriam, it is not written by the mouth of God. It says that Moses died Al Pi Hashem, Aaron died Al Pi Hashem. This is a wonderful midrash, guys. It's a bit strange, but bear with me here. Rabbi Elazar said, Miriam also died with a kiss. For what reason is it by the mouth of Lord is not stated with regard to her? Why doesn't it say that Miriam died Al Pi Hashem? And the answer the Talmud says of these men sitting in the 6th, 7th century in Babylon is it's not appropriate to mention death by a kiss with regard to a woman. Because even though she died with a death which is a mavet neshika, the text doesn't write it because it's not, we say it's not tznius. It's not modest that God kissed. Because God is obviously, in the eyes of these men, a great long-bearded man, right? And even though she died with the kiss of death, the text doesn't write it. Because, Gnaya davar lomar, we don't say it. She's a woman, God is a man. So again, we all know God isn't a man. God has many faces. But I would say that the rabbis, the Talmud said, maybe it's not written. Because when we read it, we see it in the image of the old man in the sky. But we know that Miriam herself, the prophetess, the sister of Moses and Aaron, also died a death of a kiss. Mavet neshika. And here that we've done these 3 things, the birth, the getting married, and the death. So listen to this Hasidic source. It appears in a book called Siach Sarfei Kodesh, a book by Fshischa, by the Reb Simcha Bunim, collected stories. And he's, I would say, from the mid-19th century. And here it says, I once heard in the name of the Sadi Gora Rebbe, who's a Rebbe from the tradition of Rishon, that he said to his son, the Biala Rebbe, on the day of his wedding. And I don't completely understand this, but let's read it anyways. Be aware, he said to his son, there are 3 sounds in the world. When one is born, when one dies, and when one is being walked to the chuppah, to his marriage. And all these sounds must be made equal together. There's 3 moments. The cry of being born, the cry of dying, and the cry of being together or being separated. And all these cries are really powerful ones. And in essence, maybe death is also a certain marriage. It says about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that his death is a hilulah, is a marriage ceremony, because it's separation but union. The union of the soul back with the place it came from. So being born, it's separation from the womb, but being connected to a new world. So in all these things, it's not about connection, separation, but it's about transition. It's about transition. Okay, here's another source we did before. But again, the shofar, we learn it from Sisra's mother. It's a day of sounding tru'ah of the shofar. And in Aramaic, it's translated as a day of Yevava. What is a Yevava? It's learned and written about the mother of Sisra. Through the window appeared Sisra's mother. Behind the lattice, she wailed. Behind the lattice, she wailed. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why so late the clatter of his wheels? So one sage taught that this means moaning, broken sighs, shvarim, which are tu, tu, tu. And a different sage thought that this means the whimpers, the short blasts that are called tru'ah. But we learned both of them from a mother who just lost her son. A crying mother who's crying over the death of her son. And here I want to jump with you into the 2 readings that we read on Rosh Hashanah. Because on Rosh Hashanah there's 2 readings, there's 2 days, and on the first day we read one story, and on the second day we read a different story. And both of these stories are about cries of mothers, in a way. And about, in a way, the almost loss of their children. Now, we know that on Rosh Hashanah, one of the things that we read about that happened on Rosh Hashanah was the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which is the story of Abraham taking his chosen son, which is fascinating because in Islam, in the Midrash, in the Hadithim of the Muslim tradition, he took his chosen son Ishmael. But Abraham, he took his son, and this story became such an important story in all the monotheistic religions. Even in Christianity, this is an important story of God saying, yes, I'm not going to give this son, but in a couple generations from now, I'll be sacrificing a different one of my sons here on the same place. It's thinking of Jesus, like the prophecy. So in all 3 religions, the Akedah is an important story. But there's another story that we read on the first day. The second day is the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and we'll read it. But the first day we have a story of the connection between Sarah and Hagar. Who is Hagar? Hagar is Sarah's maidservant, who when she was not able to become pregnant for a long time, she said to Abraham, Abraham, maybe you should marry or take Hagar, my maidservant, and have children with her. And he did that, and he had his first son, because Abraham's first son isn't Isaac, it's Ishmael, the father of all of our Muslim cousins. They are also the children of Ibrahim Khalil Allah, Abraham the friend of God. And this tension between Sarah and Hagar is spoken about also on Rosh Hashanah. And it's interesting. So I want us to read this together because it's also about the cry of the mother, scared that she may lose her son. So let's read this together. So this it takes us, the reading, is after Sarah finally does have a child. And when her child is born, until then she was able to look and say, well, at least Abraham has a kid. Maybe he's not my kid. Ishmael's a bit of a wild kid. He's out in the, running around the desert. But it's one thing when I don't have a kid. But suddenly, when she had a child, she had a bit of a hard time. But the truth is, I want to say, she also was pretty mean. Once Hagar got pregnant, Sarah wasn't that easy with her. She was mean to her, and one day Hagar ran away into the desert, and an angel found her and said, it's okay, go back. Your son will be a great man, and a great nation will come out of him. And she went back. Okay? But after he was born, Sarah saw, and now I'm reading from the text, Sarah saw, this is all in Genesis, in the first chapters of Genesis. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham playing. Now it's interesting, the word is mitzachek. It's translated like misachek, which is playing, but mitzachek can mean laughing. It can mean toying around. It sometimes can mean something sexual as well. So it's unclear what was happening there, but he was doing something that made Sarah uncomfortable. Ishmael, who at this point was, not very old, but he must have been about 13. And she said to Abraham, cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Meaning, I have a son now. When I said you can have her and have a kid with her, Mazel Tov, that's great, but it doesn't work anymore because I have a son now, and I don't want him to have to share the inheritance of anything with him, so it's time to send her away. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, because it concerned a son of his. Abraham loved Ishmael. Abraham didn't think this was the right thing to do. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you to do, listen to her, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be continued for you. As for the son of Hagar, of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed. Don't worry, I'll take care of him. Early next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away, and she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Beersheba, it's a city down south of Hebron. It's the capital of the Negev. It is right at the edge, the beginning of a desert. And she wandered about alone. She has a skin of water, but she's in the desert. And when the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes, and she went and sat down at a distance, a bowshot away, for she thought, let me not look on as the child dies. I don't want to see him die. My kid he has nothing to drink. He's thirsty. And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. This is the cry of a mother about to lose her son. And God heard the cry of the boy, because the boy was also crying. She was crying, and he was crying. And she says, I'm putting him under a bush because it's shady, but I don't want to hear him die. I don't want to hear that sound. He's crying his last words as he's crying, left alone, abandoned in the desert. And God heard the cry of the boy. And an angel, a messenger of God, called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, Hagar, what troubles you? Fear not, for God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is. He heard the sound of the child crying where he is. The Midrash said, how could this be? We know the children of Ishmael will end up being the enemies and fighting against... we've been fighting with our Muslim cousins for quite a long time, way before the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But they said, how could it be? Why did he save? Some of the rabbis asked. And he says, no, listen to the verse. It says, I heard The voice of the boy, Be'asher hu sham. Wherever he is, I hear his voice. At that moment, I don't care what he will become, what will be of him, what will happen in his future, who his children will be. He is crying, and I have compassion because I hear the voice of his cry. Come, lift up the boy and hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him. And then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. Couple things. First of all, I would like telling this story when I was a tour guide and I'd be in the Negev. There are a lot of Nabatean areas that the Nabateans would go through the desert, and it would look like you're in the middle of nowhere, that there's nothing there. And I would take a group. It would be at Nachal Chavarim, which is somewhere in the central Negev, and I'd read the story to them from the Bible, and I would say, what happened? What was the miracle? So people would say, the miracle is that suddenly God made a well of water appear, and I'd say, that's not what it says. It says that God opened her eyes. Exactly. Because the well was always there, but she didn't see it. And the Midrash says, everybody is blind until God opens their eyes. What a beautiful Midrash. I'll say it again. Kulam sumin. We are all blind until God opens our eyes. And we see what has always been here. And I stand next to, there's a big tree there, and I move the branch to the side, and you see a big water pit there. And we can walk into it and see it. How easy these things can... Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of our eyes. Okay? But I want to say another thing about this teaching about Hagar and Ishmael, because here we have Hagar crying, and we have Ishmael crying, and part of us, even though Abraham was distressed and Sarah was pretty jealous and said, get out, and some people say Sarah's punishment is going to come soon because she didn't have compassion for Ishmael. And listen how some of the tension between the Israelis and the Palestinians, the children of Isaac, the children of Ishmael. Look how old they are. Look how ancient they are. But before we go there, I want to go one more thing. Because when we speak about the sound of the shofar, because this is what's read in the first day of the shofar. So what is the shofar? What is the cry? We have the cry of Ishmael under the bush, who's crying. We have the cry of Hagar, who cries and doesn't want to see her son die. But there's another voice. There's another cry. There's the cry of Sarah, who says, get this kid out of here. And what does God say to Abraham? And I think this is something very important. God says, the translation here isn't exact, because it says, God said to Abraham, listen to your wife. Do whatever Sarah tells you to do. But I want to read the Hebrew and translate it slowly with you, because this is very important. It's not exactly connected, but I think there's something very important here. So bear with me. God says, Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, shma bekola. What Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. He doesn't say, follow her command. It doesn't say, do what she asks. It says, Abraham, listen to her voice. Because Sarah is a mother who's trying to protect her child. She's distressed. She's at a loss of words. She's jealous. And sometimes I say to parents who I work with, you don't always have to do what your kids say or ask. But do you listen to their voice? Do you hear the pain? What God essentially said to Hagar, to Sarah, no, what God said to Abraham was, listen to your wife's pain in her voice. Because her call, don't just hear her words. If you only hear her words, you'll do what she says. But if, Shema bekola, if you listen to her voice, maybe he could have left Ishmael there. Maybe there is a great fixing that could have been done many years ago if Abraham would have learned not to follow what she said, but listen to her voice. And that's what we try to do on Rosh Hashanah. We try to listen to the call of the shofar, not to the words. The words are less important. The words, look where they got us. They didn't bring us to such a good place. But the voice of Sarah, the voice of Hagar, the voice of Ishmael, all these are voices that we need to hear. Okay. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we read the following text, which is the story of the Akedah. And we're going to go through this in a little bit. And after these things, God put Abraham to a test, saying to him, Abraham. And Abraham answered, Here I am. Hineni. Take your son, your favored one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. The Midrash says, when God said to him, Take your son, Abraham said, I have two sons. Your favored one, he says, he's favored by this mother, Hagar. He's favored by that mother, Sarah, whom you love. I love both of them. And then God says, Take Isaac and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. So early next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey and took two of his servants and his son Isaac. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and he set out for the place of which God had told him. He left Beersheba, and 3 days later, he's on the mountains of Jerusalem. And on the third day, as he reached, if you know Jerusalem, it's in the mountains of Armon HaNatziv, where the Tayelet is, the promenade. And you kind of go over a certain viewpoint, and suddenly you see the valley, that in the middle of the valley is Mount Moriah, and he saw the place from afar. And then Abraham said to his servants, You stay here with the donkey, and the boy and I will go up there. We will worship, and we will return to you. And Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, and he put it on his son Isaac. And he himself took the firestone and the knife, and the two walked together. And in Hebrew it says, Vayilchu shnehem yachdav. And then Isaac said to his father Abraham, Avi, father? And Abraham answered, Bni, my son. I'm stopping here just to tell you this is the first place in the Torah where a parent says, my son, and a kid says, Abba, father. It's a very intimate, very special moment between a parent and child. And he says to him, I see the firestone and the wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, God will see to the sheep for this burnt offering, my son. But Abraham knows. Isaac isn't that sure yet. Does he know? Does he not know? And the two walked together. And they arrived at the place in which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there. He laid out the wood. He bound his son Isaac. He laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. And some commentators said, why does it have to say that he picked up the knife? Not just to add to the drama, but that everything against him, he didn't want to do this. He had to actively move his hand because he didn't want to do this. This was hard for him. At this moment, Isaac knows he's the one. He's about to die. His dad, he's standing there watching his dad almost try to kill him. There's a midrash that says that angels were gathered in heaven and they cried. And the tears of the angels entered into Isaac's eyes, and he went blind from the angels' tears of watching him give up his life. And he gave his neck, he held his neck out like that, saying, I'm ready. And Abraham said, I'm ready. And then a messenger of God called him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham! And he answered, Here I am. Do not raise your hand against the boy, or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. When Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went on and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. And what did the ram, after they sacrificed the ram, what did the ram leave Abraham with? A shofar. And here we have some of the story about what happened on Rosh Hashanah. Okay? What is this story? On the one hand, it's a terrible story. Some people say Abraham failed the test because He was willing to do this to his son. He should have stood up to God like he stood up to save the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. Other people say it's one thing to stand up for something that's not yours, but he didn't know. Was he supposed to stand up for his son or not? He didn't know. And some people say, there's this whole argument. Was it Abraham bringing Isaac? Was it Abraham bringing Ishmael? And I heard once a beautiful thing, which is, this is Abraham's test. Which one of his sons was the one that he was tested with? That's less important than the fact that Abraham stood up to this test. But what was this test? And I want to maybe give this a different kind of twist. And this is something I received from my father. And it's a teaching that says that every soul, before it comes into the world, it sees a vision. Before it comes down, it sees a vision of what the world is supposed to be. It's a beautiful vision. The world is gorgeous, amazing, magnificent. And each soul, when it sees that, it says, wow, this is amazing. I want to come down and to be part of this world. And God says, wait 1 second, and he kind of switches, and he puts on a different video, a different show, something different on. And then we see the world as it is. There's pain, there's difficulty, there's hardship, there's violence, there's loss, there's sorrow. And every soul says, God, what's going on? The first one looked so beautiful. This looks so hard. What's... And God says, ay. He sighs and says, the first one is my dream of what the world's supposed to be. And the second one, I gave each person free will. Second one is what the world actually is. And this teaching says that at that moment, every soul, every one of us, stood up and said, God, we want to take a vow upon ourselves to come to the world and to bring it one step closer to your vision of what the world's supposed to be like. And God says, wonderful, sign here, here, here. And each person chooses his family. My dad used to joke and say that's what he calls Planned Parenthood. That each kid gets to choose who his mom, who his dad, who his family is, who his teachers are. And you come into your mother's womb. And the Talmud in Nida says that an angel comes into the baby's womb and teaches each child the entire Torah. And they say, what's the Torah? He's not teaching him the scriptural Torah, but his Torah, what he's supposed to do in the world, who he's supposed to meet, what he's supposed to see. And once the kid, the baby, has everything, and he says, okay, I'm ready to go. I know what I'm supposed to do, what my vision is, what my promise that I took, who's going to help me, who I'm going to meet. I have it all worked out. I've memorized it. Okay, let me go. And then the angel says, wait, one last thing here. I forgot to tell you, I need to now smack you right under your nose where we have this line here, and you're about to forget everything that you learned. And the baby says, what? But the birth has already began. He's about to be born, and as he's coming out, he smacks him on the lip. And that's why a baby cries when he's born. And when he cries, it's because a second ago he knew exactly what he's supposed to do, who he's supposed to meet, what his vision is, what he was supposed to do in the world, what he promised, what he took upon himself. And then he forgets everything. And there were two souls who came into the world. That one of them said to God, God, I want to make the world closer to your vision, and I want to give the most precious thing to me. The most precious thing, that's what I'm going to give up to make the world closer to what it's supposed to be. Okay? Came down into the world. And the second soul that came down said, God, I want to give my own life to make this world closer to what it's supposed to be. Okay, great. So these two souls came down. They forgot. They got hit under the nose. And suddenly, father and son are walking together. And I want to point out in the text, it says twice, Vayilchu shnehem yachdav, and they both walked together. Right? It says at the beginning they walked together. And then he says, father, son, where's the... And then it says again, and they walked, Vayilchu shnehem yachdav, and they both walked together. And when the same thing's written twice, something meaningful happens between the first and second time. What I heard is that as they were walking, suddenly, Rosh Hashanah, one of the three symbols of Rosh Hashanah is Malchuyot, kingdom, Zichronot, memory, and Shofarot, shofar. Memories, because we forget, we're born into forgetfulness. We forget so much, and we're trying to remember that we forgot. And as they're walking together, suddenly Abraham is walking with his son, about to sacrifice him, and suddenly, boom! His memory is being flooded, and he goes, oh no, I remember. Isaac, this isn't your fault. My son! Before I came into the world, I promised that I would give the most precious thing for God to make the world better. I had no idea that it would be you. I didn't know I'm dragging you into this. I'm so sorry. This is something that I did. I said that I would do this. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I'm so sorry. But at that moment, Isaac remembered as well. And it came flooding back to him too. And he said, Father, this isn't your fault. Before I came into the world, I said that I would give my own life. I would even be killed. I would give my own life and die to make this world closer. If I had no idea that you would be the one who would have to do it. If I knew, I wouldn't have asked for this. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. But then when he said Father and he said Son, they understood that they're both playing roles in each other's play, in each other's sacred theater, in each other's role. And that's when they walked together, because the first time they walked together not knowing, but the second time they walked together remembering what it is their vision of what they're supposed to do in the world was. And this is a teaching of the teaching of the vow, the teaching of what it is we are trying to remember. Okay? And Abraham said, I'm willing to, if I need to, give up, give the life of my son, kill. What a terrible thing. I didn't think that I would have to give my son. And at the end he didn't. But Isaac said, I didn't think I'd have to make my father give up my own life. This is terrible. And this is the moment of the shofar. The moment where he's standing there thinking that this is the end. That this is the end. And it says in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Abau said, why does one sound a blast with a shofar made from a ram's horn on Rosh Hashanah? The Holy One, blessed be He, said, sound a blast before me with a shofar made from a ram's horn, so that I will remember the binding of Isaac, the son of Abraham, in whose stead a ram was sacrificed. And I will ascribe it to you as if you sacrificed yourself to me. Rosh Hashanah is the day that it's as if we're giving up our own life for God. Who's to life, who's to death? That moment that I'm even ready to give up everything, to give my own life, to stop living. And it's as if you bound yourself like Isaac did. We too reenact that. In the moment of the shofar, the call coming out, it's like the sound of our soul leaving the body. And listen to this. Another cry of a mother, of Sarah. When Abraham returned from Mount Moriah, the anger of Samael, the angel of death, was kindled. Because he saw that the desire of his heart to frustrate the offering of our father Abraham had not been realized. He wanted to stop it. He didn't like this act of faith. He wasn't happy about it. So what did he do? He went and said to Sarah, the angel of death dressed up as an old man, and he came to Sarah and says, Hast thou not heard what happened in the world? She said to him, No. And he said to her, Thy husband, Abraham, has taken thy son Isaac, and slain him, and offered him up as a burnt offering upon the altar, while he was weeping and wailing. So he comes to the mother and says, Did you not hear that Abraham killed your son while he was weeping and wailing? And Sarah began to weep and to wail aloud 3 times, corresponding to the 3 tkiot, long notes of the shofar. And she gave forth 3 yelalot, corresponding to the 3 short notes of the shofar. And her soul left her, and she died. Abraham came and found that she was dead. Where did he come from? From Mount Moriah, as it is said, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah. So the angel of death comes and he says to the mother, I want you to know. Can you imagine your son crying and wailing? And she begins to weep and wail. And at the moment of her cries, like the cries of the shofar, she dies. Her soul leaves her at that moment. So what are the tkiyot? It's like the cry at the moment of death of Sarah, thinking for a second that she lost everything. It's based on the Midrash because at the end of, right after the portion of God, of Abraham and the binding of Isaac, right after that is the death of Sarah. Right after Parashat Vayera, at the end of it is the binding of Isaac, and it says, and the life of Sarah was. And this is what Midrash do, is say, why did she die here right after that? She heard and she cried. But her death happened with the cry of the shofar. This is a beautiful text called the Book of Adam and Eve. And it's in the Apocrypha. It's a very rich text. Some people say it's called the Vision of Moses. And it's old. It's from the Greek time period, and it's gorgeous. And here too is some of the earliest descriptions of blowing the shofar by the angels. And thus prayed Eve on her knees. So this is later than the Torah text, but it's earlier than the Mishnah. We're talking about around 200 BC. This text was written. And it talks about the death of Adam. So thus prayed Eve on her knees, and behold, the angel of humanity came to her and raised her up and said, Rise up, Eve, from thy penitence, for behold, Adam thy husband is gone out of his body. Rise up and behold his spirit borne aloft to his maker. So she's crying, but the angel comes and says, Look up. And Eve rose up and wiped off her tears with her hand. And the angel said to her, Lift up thyself from the earth. And she gazed steadfastly into heaven, and beheld a chariot of light, borne by 4 bright eagles. And it were impossible for any man born of woman to tell the glory of them, or behold their face, and angels going before the chariot. And when they came to the place where your father Adam was, the chariot halted, and the seraphim, the angels. And then Seth, who is the son, born after Hevel died, he arose and came to his mother, and to her he said, What is thy trouble? Why weepest thou? And she said to him, Look up and see with your eyes. The 7 heavens opened, and see how the soul of your father lies on its face, and all the holy angels are praying on his behalf, and saying, Pardon him, Father of all, for he is in your image. And then an angel blew the shofar, and there stood up all the angels, and they were lying on their faces, and they cried aloud in an awful voice and said, Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Kvod Hashem Mima'asav. Blessed be the glory of the Lord from the works of his making. And he has compassion on Adam, the creature of his hands. It's a beautiful description of death, and it's a beautiful story as well. There's another blowing of the shofar as they eat from the fruit, as they transition again. The shofar is a transition. Remember we said, Mina metzar karatia, from a tight place, I move into an open space. Like the moment of death, I was reading through some Kabbalah-Ross books where she speaks about the moment of death as a passageway. She says, I know in my image it's a passageway between the mountains with wild flowers. But we all have a way where we come a tunnel of light. It's like a shofar as well. A tunnel of light that gets bigger and bigger. It's like a shofar. That's what it's like. I brought 2 more sources. This is interesting. I wasn't sure if to bring this or not. It's from the book of Revelations. And after the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, there's a story. Now, Revelations was written in Coptic. No, I don't know if Coptic, but in Greek. And in the Hebrew translation, they translate trumpets as shofar. But the original Greek word was chatzotzrot, which was like the trumpets that were made for the people of Israel in the desert. But it's unclear if the book of Revelations, it was written by somebody who's Jewish, and it was unclear if he wrote it initially in Hebrew or not. But since the Hebrew translation translated it as shofarot, I brought this as well. And here, the book of Revelation, in my opinion, it's all dream material, these prophecies. So when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels standing before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets, Shiv'ah shofarot. And the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of trees was burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. And the second angel sounded, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures that were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. There's like the end of days. There's death that comes with the shofar. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as if it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. And many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the stars, and darkened, and the day shone not for the third part of it, and the night likewise. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, oi, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound. And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the 6th angel, which had the trumpet, the shofar, Loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were repaired for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year for to slay the third part of men. So it's about death and destruction. It's an apocalypse. From the Apocrypha to the apocalypse. But here we have angels blowing a shofar as death, as life comes to an end. And the last part that I brought, which is from a completely different shofar and a different tradition, is from the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita, when I bring the kids and show them my collection of shofarot, I say, will you believe me if I tell you that this is a shofar as well? And they say, no way. They say, don't try this in your synagogue. But this is a shofar that I bought in India. It's a conch shell. And in the story of the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred text of the Hindus, there's a beautiful story. In the first chapter, I brought a little piece of it, of people blowing the shofar as they're about to go to war. The Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata, it starts with Arjuna, who's a prince, fighting for his brother to regain the throne, fighting against his uncle, who's the blind king, and his charioteer in the chariot with him is Krishna. And Krishna is there to help him, but he also gives him advice. And this is how it opens up. And to me it connected as well, and I see that we're really almost at the end, but I'd like to read this and also bring in another tradition and let the other sound of the shofar from this other tradition also kind of sound, as we've heard the Christian from the book of Revelations, but also the Hindu shofar. Standing on their great chariot yoked with white stallions, Krishna and Arjuna sounded their divine conches. Krishna blew Panchajanya, one from a demon. Arjuna blew Devadatta, a gift of the gods. Fierce wolf-bellied Bhima blew Paundra, his great conch of the east. It's amazing. They each have a conch, and each conch has a name. Yudhishthira, Kunti's son, the king, blew Anantavijaya, conch of boundless victory. His twin brothers Nakula and Sadhiva blew conches resonant and jewel-toned. The king of Benaras, Varanasi, a superb archer, and Sinkandim on his great chariot, Drishtainyuma, Virata, and indomitable Satyaki all blew their conches. Drupata with his 5 grandsons, and Subhadra, strong-armed son, each in his turn blew their conches. So we have all these people standing battling one another, and they're all sounding these conches. And it could be a pretty loud sound. A different quality than the shofar, but a beautiful one as well. And then they start talking. O king, the noise tore the hearts of Dhritarashtra's sons, who was the blind king, and tumult echoed through heaven and earth. Arjuna saw Dhritarashtra's sons assembled as weapons were ready to clash, and he lifted his bow. He told his charioteer, Krishna, halt my chariot between the armies, far enough for me to see these men who lust for war, ready to fight with me in the strain of battle. I see men gathered here, eager to fight. When Arjuna had spoken, Krishna halted their splendid chariot between the armies. He says, wait, I want to see these people I'm fighting. And facing all the great kings, he said, Arjuna, see the Kuru men assembled here. They're both from the Kuru family. Arjuna saw them standing, their fathers, grandfathers, teachers, uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, and friends. He surveyed his elders and companions in both armies. All his kinsmen assembled together, dejected, filled with strange pity, he said this, Krishna, I see my kinsmen gathered here, wanting war. My limbs sink, my mouth is parched, my body trembles, my hair bristles on my flesh. The magic bow slips from my hand, my skin burns. I cannot stand still. My mind reels. I see omens of chaos, Krishna. I see no good in killing my kinsmen in battle. I seek no victory or kingship or pleasures. What use to us are kingship, delight, or life itself? They are teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, uncles, grandsons, fathers, and brothers of wives and other men of our family. I do not want to kill them, even if I am killed, Krishna, not for kingship of all three worlds, much less for the earth. If Dhritarashtra's army's son kill me in battle when I am unarmed and offer no resistance, it will be my reward. And saying this, in the time of war, Arjuna slumped into the chariot and laid down his bow and arrows, his mind tormented by grief. And it goes on. The battle does happen. Almost everybody dies. And the whole time they speak. And it's seen as this conversation. It's like the ego speaking to the soul. It reminds me a little bit of the story we did on the first time of when a man goes to battle. And what are we trying to fight for? What are we trying to reclaim? But here we have the opening scene where he says, I'm going to kill and be killed. And the sound of the shofar, this cry that is the opening ceremony of going in, is suddenly the sound of war and the sound of death. Maybe like the sound of Joshua blowing the shofar before going into Jericho. We learned it last week as the story of a Jewish marriage. But there's something about going to battle where you say, am I going to kill? Am I going to be killed? Will I live or will I die? In a way, going to battle is almost like a Yom Kippur on its own. And here we have Arjuna say, I don't want this. I don't want this. And the sound of the shofar and the cry of his voice, his mind tormented by grief, the way he describes how hard it is for him, you can hear his cry as well. Not just the words, but the voice of Krishna and the voice of Arjuna about to go to battle. This is from Freud, and we'll end with that and do a short meditation. We've shown an unmistakable tendency to put death aside, to eliminate it from life. We attempt to hush it up. We cannot indeed imagine our own death. Whenever we try to do so, we find that we survive ourselves as spectators. The school of psychoanalysis could thus assert that at bottom no one believes in his own death, which amounts to saying, in the unconscious, every one of us is convinced of his immortality. Death is, of course, not deferred through our on the subject. And when it occurs, we are always deeply affected, as if our expectations had been shattered. How could this be? How could this happen? How could somebody die? How can we die? How could the people we love die? We remember the old saying, pardon my Latin, si vis pacem, para bellum. If you wish peace, prepare for war. The time call for a paraphrase, says Freud. Si vis vitam, para mortem. If you wish life, prepare for death. I don't know how many of you know this, but Sigmund Freud, he died on the eve of Yom Kippur. He died by suicide. He already had serious cancer in his throat, in his tongue, and he took a lot of morphium on the eve of Yom Kippur. And his soul left as Jews everywhere were gathering to pray the prayer of Kol Nidre. That's when Freud died. If you wish life, prepare for death. So I want to invite everybody now to do a little bit of a guided meditation. And I want us to close your eyes. And we're going to speak a little bit about Mavet Neshika, the death of a kiss. The kiss death. Breathe in a deep breath. Fill your whole body with this air, with life, with love. Hold it in and then breathe out, emptying yourself completely of your breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feel the weight of your body on the chair. Feel your legs on the floor. Feel your hands. Feel your clothing on your body. Try to notice what sounds you hear around you. You hear the sound of my voice, but what else do you pay attention to coming on the outside? What sensations do you feel? Cold, heat? What do you feel inside your body? Can you hear the sound of your heartbeat? Are there thoughts coming or leaving? I want you to imagine yourself at the last day of your life. Where are you? Are you sitting? Are you walking? Who's with you? You may want people there with you. You may not want anyone there around you. Where do you imagine yourself being? What does it look like? What does it taste like? What do you see around you? What do you hear? They say that when a person dies, or right before he dies, that nobody dies alone, and there are always people who come and meet you on the other side, those people from our past who we've lost. Who do you want waiting for you at the other side? Who do you want holding your hand, sitting next to you, in this side? Who do you want there with you as you transition? What are your feelings or thoughts? Are you worried? Do you feel complete? Are there things you still needed a bit more time to do? What are things that you did well as you look back at the panorama of your life? We spoke of the blowing of the shofar as God blowing life into Adam and giving him life. And now I want you to have that image again of God as you're lying there in the most perfect place, surrounded by the people you love, about to be led back to the people you want to be with, wherever it is you are. And I want you to imagine a kiss coming through, opening up from this world to the next. And in this sweet, tender, loving kiss on your lips, there is a kiss and also a breath that God is breathing in, the breath He gave. And when God kisses us, He takes out the cry of the shofar, the sound of our soul, the pain of our existence, the call, the great call, the call of nature, the call of life, the call of death, the sound of the shofar, as we are sounding it, as God is accepting it, as we are moving from one world to the next. God, take my cry, the cry of my soul, I offer it to you in this tender moment of death, of dying, in this kiss of love. Here is the Tkiya Gdola, the great call of the shofar. If anybody would like to share or write either on the WhatsApp group or to me personally what things came up. It's okay if we don't have the answers to some of these questions. Usually we spend most of our life not wanting to think about them. But if you'd like to share with our community or with me, I'd love to hear. I'll be traveling the next couple of days, so I won't always be able to answer, but I would love to hear from you. And I'm going to send something out on the WhatsApp group, a beautiful piece by Reb Zalman, an audio piece of what he did, which is called Rites of Passage, his meditation. It's about 7 minutes of his version of what he sees as a vidui, of the listening, of the looking at our life, and the preparing to come up with this moment of death and the great call of the shofar. as it calls us to come back, to transition, to move on. Have a beautiful week. Next week, we are in class 5. We're going to be learning about the snake, because the snake, it's about resurrection. It's about life after death. It's about Jonah in the belly of the whale. And we'll be doing images of resurrection, of life after death, and the call of the shofar as the awakening. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you all next week. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.